and welcome to another episode of Cloud Security Podcast. This is the CISO perspective episode, and I've got an old friend here to give you guys a perspective of what CISO and being a CISO is all about in a cloud world I was going to say post-COVID. We're not really post-COVID yet. So whenever we get to that stage, whatever the new normal is. So without further ado, let me put the cue in the music. But if you're here for the first time, we have, live streams every weekend, and that's the website for it. And that's the show name. So let's get into this, and I'll get the guest in. Let me just put the music on. Hey, how's it going, Stu? Thanks for coming in, man.
Yeah, good to see you again, mate.
Good to see you as well. I was going to say Happy New Year. I guess it's kind of like one of those times when do you stop saying Happy New Year? Is it it's like the middle of January already? So yeah, I feel like I should keep, every time I see someone, Happy New Year.
Probably about now, I think. So yeah, Happy New Year. Happy New Year
yeah, fair enough. Thanks for coming in, by the way. I've got my bottle this time. I know last time you came in was season 1. What have you got for drinking for yourself to get cheap?
Coffee. I live on coffee these days. So.
Oh, you live on coffee these days?
I live on coffee. Yeah, it's kind of one of the only vices these days. I never used to be a coffee snob, but the last few years I've got into it a little bit more.
Okay then. Well, it sounds like we should definitely talk about more coffee after this as well, man. But I guess thanks for coming in again, because for people who may have seen you before, who are following the podcast in season 1, you were on season 1, so it's really amazing that I can bring you back onto season 1 on the first month or season 3. And it was the first month of season 1 as well, so it kind of works out really well that you were back on the same month that you were there 3 years ago. Now, I know a lot about you, but a lot of people in the audience who are probably new and joined in the last couple of years may not have had a bit of intro about yourself. Could you share a bit about yourself and how you got into cybersecurity?
Yeah, sure. So I'm currently the CISO at TrustPilot, which is a sort of leading review site across the globe. We've got offices in Edinburgh, which is where I live, London, Copenhagen, which is where the company was formed, various other offices around Europe. We're in New York and Denver, and also in Melbourne, where you are. So yeah, joined that in March last year to sort of build out the team team, build out the function. My history from a security point of view has been about 10 or 11 years now in the industry across various tech companies. But yeah, so my background actually was, I think I've done this on a few talks, but I left school at 17, so I don't have a degree. And I joined RBS, Royal Bank of Scotland, in 98, long time ago now. But I joined as a mainframe developer straight from school. I did my hires in Scotland and then straight into a job. And I really, really wasn't very good at that job, and I'm quite vocal about not being very good at it. I was doing COBOL and kicks and ACL and a few other things that I've long since forgotten. And I spent about 12 years doing that. And again, a talk I've done previously at another event delved into some of the things that happened during those times and where that path led to. And it was mainly during my 20s. And the reason I wasn't very good is that I lived for the weekends, like lots of people at those ages do. And I loved music. You can see guitars and things behind me.
Yeah.
I absolutely kind of loved music. That was and still is my one main love in life, apart from my family, obviously. So I kind of lived for the weekends, and my job was just a job. It was a way to pay my mortgage, and beer money for the weekend. So I guess I hadn't really found what I wanted to do career-wise at that point. I wanted to get into the music industry. I really, really wanted to earn a living doing that. And then at the end of my 20s, back when the financial crash happened, I got offered a redundancy. So I got offered a year's salary, basically for taking redundancy. So I kind of snapped a hand off, really. And I spent a year in the music industry and DJ'd and made records for people and had a radio show at the time. And a few other things. I traveled a little bit, which was great. I got to see some of the world and had a good time. Definitely had a good time. But then I sort of ran out of money. Is the long.
And then cybersecurity got onto you after that.
Yeah, I took a real risk by doing that and going into the music industry and trying something different. And I don't think I'd make the same. Well, I think I would make the same decision, but with a little bit more thought to it. I just assumed that it would work out in a naive way, but it kind of didn't. I didn't actually really enjoy that industry either. I found it quite strange to earn a living from, try to earn a living from music. So
Right.
anyway, long story short, I applied for lots of jobs at the end of that year when the money was running out because I needed to get back into work, and I was basically trying to get back into what I had been doing previously. And I ended up at a company called the Train Line, excuse me, and I was in sort of system support and third line support. So yeah, more kind of making sure applications were running and kind of staying up.
Also, hardware engineering background as well. Then I guess so DJing, and then moving on to engineering, and then cybersecurity.
Yeah, I actually I had a lot of skills in those days at making music, so I used computer applications to make music. So for anybody that makes music here, for things like Logic and Cubase, and so I was quite good at those things. But again, I still hadn't found my sort of niche. It was a great job and great company, but I didn't quite feel like I wasn't as enthused by it all still.
Right.
I had a really good boss at the time who asked me to take on, it was PCI compliance back then, so it wasn't necessarily a sort of full security role, but it was to get the train line through PCI compliance. I really, really enjoyed it, and I ended up going on security courses and starting to get involved in the industry a little bit and learn more about it. And I really got enthused by it. And I know compliance can be a little tricky at times, but I just found within about a year, I would say I felt like I'd found something that I really enjoyed doing. It was interesting. Yeah, weirdly, and it just opened me up to the bigger security piece, because I was going
right.
learning about cryptography and.
I was gonna say you'll be the first person to say you love compliance, man.
A necessary evil, isn't it?
Yeah, that's right. Unfortunately, at a C level, you definitely need one of those around you as well. And sorry, I didn't want to cut you off, but then you moved on to the cloud security piece as well, I guess.
Yeah, so I ended up at Skyscanner. I think anybody who knows me knows a bit about that journey, and then not deliberately specialized in cloud security, but just sort of ended up there, which is a bit of a theme for a lot of security people's careers anyway. They just sort of find themselves in certain places at certain times. And again, when I first got into cloud security, I really didn't know very much at all. I'm quite happy to be vocal about how little I knew about it back in some of those jobs. I just felt my way through it like everybody does in these areas, and upskilled and dealt with big incidents that happened that tend to drive your learning. So that was kind of the bulk of my time at Just Eat, which is a big sort of takeaway delivery company around the globe now. And then got offered the opportunity to come to TrustPilot, and I'm still quite heavily involved in the cloud side of things, but yeah, taking on the CISO role is obviously the breadth of building out all of the functions and all of the pillars we've got here. So I'm still heavily involved in the cloud side. I still love that side of it. But I've sort of gone back to being a bit of a generalist across those different areas. So I've had to get back into AppSec a little bit, and risk and compliance, things that maybe I've not had to do for a little while.
Oh, fair enough. Well, I think that's an interesting background as well, because to what you were saying as well, a lot of people who may be listening in and may have an aspiration to go down the CISO path, and maybe cloud security engineers right now, or cloud security tech leads of some sort, or even a principal cloud security engineer. I normally find it's a very delicate a skill set being a CISO. To your point, you're more of a generalist and not real technical. You're still technical, but not technical to the point that you know what happened yesterday in AWS. Unless someone has told you about it. So what was that thing that you had to kind of like either let go of or pick up on when transitioning from an engineering to like a leadership kind of role in cybersecurity?
Yeah, it's a real balance really of trying to keep on top of technical things in the industry and trying to keep your knowledge up in those areas, but then having that wider view. So I suppose I suppose my advice to anybody looking to take on or looking to progress to CISO roles is maybe an understanding of what these roles consist of, and it is far more around budgets and recruitment. I work for a public company now that IPO'd in March, so there's more around audit, compliance,
security questionnaires.
Yeah. Oh god, yeah. And it's kind of, you need a little bit of an understanding of all of those different areas again, as opposed to specializing in certain areas. I suppose one of the things I've had to work quite hard at is knowing what to get involved in and what not to get involved in. So I've got a small team at the moment, and as much as I want to continue to learn some of these areas and stay on top of the technical side, I also need to know when to remove myself from that and let them get on with it. And so that can be a bit of a trade-off, especially when it comes to cloud. You know how fast cloud moves and how many.
Yeah, and it's to your point. It's funny. Even if when you were deep in the cloud space, you still feel you don't know enough. And even outside of it, you feel like even more like, I remember your talk about imposter syndrome. And I always come back to it because I always feel that it is such an interesting thing in cybersecurity. No matter at what level you are, there is always an imposter syndrome that is just around the corner. Now even more with how fast the technology is moving. So, do you still feel the imposter syndrome?
That's a really good question, and I would love to do a follow-up to that talk, because yes, I do in certain ways, but I also think I've probably got on top of it quite a lot over the last few years. And the reasons for that is having moved around a little bit and got different experience in different places, good and bad. Things have not gone well as some things that have gone well. And then just being comfortable with what I do know versus what I don't know. I don't know if you can teach anybody that. I think it just happens naturally, where I no longer feel like I have to. I no longer feel like I have to sort of make things up or pretend that I know something. If I don't know it, I'll just say I don't know it, and I'll go away and try and find out. I'm lucky I work in environments where I'm given that space to go and do that. So, for example, I'm on an audit committee with the board now, so probably the first real experience of dealing with board level people, and I give them whatever information I feel they need and answer their questions. But if I don't know, then I don't know. I don't try and sort of make it up. So that's helped with the imposter syndrome thing, but I definitely still get it. I still sometimes I'm still uncomfortable with the area that I've moved into to a certain respect, that I don't know whether it's deserved at this point in time. So you sort of feel like, are there better people out there who could do a better job? I don't know. It's hard to tell, but I think it's nice to have a little bit of that. It keeps you grounded. It keeps you kind of humble to a certain extent. And that's the same with the technical skills. If you always feel like you're learning and you need to learn, well, you never, there shouldn't be any arrogance that creeps in or anything like that.
Yeah, agreed. And I think so. Maybe another question at this point in time is that now, since you've kind of you still have your fingers in the cloud world, maybe, but not as fully into the pie, to use an Australian analogy, I guess. But how do you define cloud security these days? And I guess I'm coming from a perspective because there might be a lot of people who may be security leaders or CISOs probably taking on that role in a cloud-first company where they don't know what on-premise was like, whereas people like you and I would have had a lot of years in on-premise as well, did the hard yard, and maybe went into data centers as well. Not that these people don't have to work hard; they still have to work hard, but probably even harder. But what do you find yourself defining cloud security as now versus, I guess, when you were more of a technical person versus a leader?
So I think it's come on a long way in the last 4 or 5 years. If I look back to 2017, when I probably started getting far more heavily involved, there were only a small amount of people that I could reach out to that I felt had really solved problems in AWS, particularly, actually, back then.
Oh, yeah.
Now it feels like there's thousands of people globally that have some real skill sets, and the great stuff you're doing on these kind of things to evangelize, and there's so many more people who've gone on that journey. And I think that's great, and I think that's globally kind of shifting the knowledge and the chat about it. I'm probably a little bit I suppose in a little bit of a bubble, because I've worked for companies over the last X amount of years that have been mainly cloud-based, and TrustPilot is almost completely cloud-based. We have almost no physical infrastructure whatsoever, apart from firewalls in offices. So maybe my perception is that far more of the industry is getting towards that kind of space, and I actually don't know. When I try and recruit for people in the cloud security space, it's definitely getting better, right? There's definitely a bigger pool of candidates, but there's also definitely a lot of people who are from more of those traditional network backgrounds of data centers they look after or server rooms and things.
And they want to learn about cloud, I guess.
Yeah. I've got somebody in my team just now that I'm transitioning into a cloud security engineer, and he's like super excited to do that because I think he sees how exciting the whole area is, how fast it is, what your ability is to be successful and to learn and to have job opportunities and things. So I think it'll only continue in the way that it has been, in terms of the growth and the sort of global skill sets. Seeing a huge amount of cloud security knowledge coming out of areas like India and various other parts of the world, where it's interesting to see obviously how big. I don't live there, but you can just sense how big that kind of community is becoming and how their organizations will be moving into cloud if they're not there already. So yeah, I think we're in for a continued interesting time in the cloud space. It's weird how I don't feel like there's been no big player disrupt the market for a few years. So it's been Amazon, Google, Azure. You've got sort of maybe IBM, Oracle, various others on the periphery.
Yeah.
Alibaba, I guess, in China and whatnot. But who's the next one to come? Is there going to be another one? Or are we sort of settled into those major vendors now? Is it a market you can disrupt? Really, I don't know. That would be interesting.
Actually, that's an interesting one because you almost feel, because HashiCorp tried a version of HashiCorp Cloud, and I think there are other the other players, but they're not as big, and they're probably targeting a very niche audience as well, to the point that you don't even hear it. But I find that in I run a training for SANS. I came across this really interesting person in my class one day, where we were talking about Oracle Cloud. I'm like, who the hell uses the Oracle Cloud? Rah, rah. And this gentleman was from Saudi Arabia, and he said, Ashish, I'll tell you this, that if Saudi Arabia wants to look for a cloud provider, there's actually no cloud provider there apart from Oracle.
Yeah.
So people who care about that data sovereignty, and they don't want data to leave, I guess, Saudi Arabia in this context, the only choice they have is to be working with Oracle Cloud, no matter how bad or how not so amazing it is and how everything is a custom code. And people have transitioned from Oracle Cloud to AWS and then back to, I guess, anyway, there's been like a whole storyline of people just jumping off board from Oracle, but they have found a niche for themselves. But all the other players, they don't. To your point, in the last, I dare say even 7-8 years, AWS started the market, then Azure joined in, Google Cloud. But for a few years, there was no other player. Like, you would not even think of, I can't even still think of which one would you go for a certification, unless you actually go for a very specialized company.
Yeah, on the one hand, you want there to be a mix of these things, because you don't want a monopoly in that area, and you don't want just one company kind of running the whole of cloud.
And that to Amazon, I guess.
Yeah, but at the same time, the more of these that you introduce and the more cloud platforms you have, the harder it is for us in our roles to sort of try and keep on top of it. And even that global spread of me and my little bubble thinking the world is kind of all AWS and GCP, forgetting all these other parts of the world who, for their own reasons, are using various different things.
I think one more point touching on this, because I think I was talking to someone and they said, I think there's only 30% of the enterprise segment has moved into cloud, I think, until from a stat last year. So still like 70% of the market still hasn't moved into, so people technically, to your point, you and I have our bubble for, hey, we live in a company which is cloud. I mean, I guess I've got multi-cloud, I've got all 3 clouds there, but it's almost, in a way, it's an anomaly in that 30%, because the rest of the 70% are still on premise. they're still slowly moving in, and you almost feel like
Sort of
we're
mad.
in the bubble of our own.
You'd have
Sorry?
thought it would be. You'd think it'd be the other way around, really. That most companies would now be kind of in the cloud, but
Yeah,
just
maybe after the COVID thing, maybe it would have changed. But this was when COVID started. So 2020 is when this kind of start was. So a year has passed. I imagine all the talking about COVID, how it has accelerated a lot of digital transformation programs.
yeah.
Oh, now everyone's doing digital transformation and everyone's working zero trust and everyone's trying to do that. Actually, maybe talking about COVID and in terms of like the priority from a security perspective, you find yourself you like what's the newer challenges that you have to tackle because of the whole, I guess, current COVID world we live in, I guess.
So there's a few really from an industry point of view. I think obviously the remote working thing has been huge. I was remote working before the pandemic, and I've been a big vocal supporter of the ability to do that. And I think there's a huge amount of positives for people to be working anywhere in the world as they see fit. Lots of good reasons to do that. But there's also some downsides to it as well. I mean, when we opened our offices up, the feedback was almost entirely positive around people sort of re-engaging and getting that sort of physical relationship, one-to-one thing back with people, which they just couldn't get on Zoom. I know there's a lot of kind of virtual fatigue sort of kicking in for a lot of people as well. So you're going to see that continued hybrid model. But I think what it did was it forced a lot of companies who may have historically been a bit nervous about this kind of thing to really embrace it very, very quickly because they had no choice. I remember the days of, if you said you were working from home, there would be an almost comedy distrust that you weren't doing your job that day. And I think that's what changed, which is a good thing. And I think we can trust our workforces to work as and when they need to. So there's that. I suppose the thing that worries me, and I don't want to go into any kind of politics here for obvious reasons, the weaponization of data and information, I think, just globally, I think is extremely dangerous. And I think we're in a very strange transition at the moment around the world about how we deal with information. And I think that ekes into what we do for a living, depending on what industry you might be a part of. If you're in government work or, even the financial sector, maybe where you're dealing with some really sensitive things. I worry about that. I worry about people's ability to see through some of the information that gets shared online. It's that there's a lot of nonsense out there, and that's going to continue to be a bit of a battle for all of us in our industry about how we move it forward. What's the right way for us to sort of use the internet from an information point of view? We're probably still feeling our way through that anyway from an internet point of view, but then this is kicked off. It's difficult to sometimes when you read things online these days, it's difficult to know what's true and what isn't. And that fundamentally can't be a good thing for society. I don't want to go too deep on this, but it can't be good. So our industry's got a part to play on that, obviously, as cyber professionals. How do we try and, I wouldn't say police the internet, but what's the right way to move all this forward? And I don't have the answers to that. So I think there's a couple of things. There's obviously the sort of physical element of working from different places, and COVID has accelerated the remote working globally. It's great for talent. It's great for job opportunities. The idea of, I'm doing it myself this year, I think, where the idea of just going somewhere for 2 weeks where I don't even need to use any holidays up. I can just work from somewhere else. My kids can go and play around the pool for a week and I'll sit and work somewhere. That's really, really powerful, I think, in the tech industry. But then, I worry about the sort of societal elements of what the internet is morphing into, I guess.
Yeah, well, it's funny you mentioned that because I've been kind of looking at the whole Roblox and metaverse thing as well, how like a lot of kids are kind of going out. And to your point, I still feel it's relevant to the 2022 conversation that we're having as well, where someone said this once to me that what you see kids doing these days is what professionals face in a few years' time. And at the moment, there's definitely a theme there where kids are in this immersive worlds on the internet, where with remote working and being lockdowns and all that, people are being forced to be at home. Kids are being forced to be at home. So they're even more into these immersive worlds of metaverse, Roblox conversations as well. So yeah, man, I think it's definitely a very nerve-wracking world we're moving towards.
Well, I guess we need to continue to embrace it. I've been the same. I've got a couple of young children, a 2-year-old and a nearly 5-year-old, and we've tried to not shield them from technology, but introduce it at the right time. So at Christmas that was the first time they've had their own kind of iPads, right? Which
Right.
We've been quite keen to avoid those as early as possible,
Yep.
and encourage them to still do traditional, reading and writing and things on paper. But you've got to understand that their world is going to be different from the one I grew up in and the one you grew up in. Technology is going to be an even bigger part of their lives. I grew up without the internet, right? So I'm old enough to remember that. They're not going to have that. The internet's going to be the main place that they do lots of things. But I just think we've got to be careful with it, and it shouldn't replace a lot of human to human content in certain ways. And even this last 2 years, I don't know about you, but my own personal journey has been interesting. So yeah, everything obviously moved online, and we got very used to socializing online for a period of time. And I've kind of gone full circle on it now. I don't go on social media in the way that I used to. I'm happy to do these kind of things every now and again, but even then, I'm not doing very many of them. Been back in offices as much as I can, just to try and get that contact again. So I'm probably going full circle on some of my views about it and some of my thoughts about it. I guess we've just missed it. We've just missed that physical connection with people and the relationships that you can build.
Yeah, that's interesting, because I'm with you on that one, where I guess they should definitely, like, the kids and everyone else should embrace everything new that's coming up. Like, we're probably living in a world where metaverse is still not real and there is no hologram, which looks very nice. But they might grow up in a world and we'll be like what our parents used to be with Microsoft Office. Like, you'll have in your resume, I know AWS, or at least I used to know AWS, and it would be like a given knowledge for kids. They would know exactly what AWS is, all the services and everything. And I definitely feel because the information is so easily available, to your point earlier, as cybersecurity professional, we have a responsibility to be at least raising awareness for what's coming in the industry and what we see as, hey, watch out for this one.
If you think, I remember having a conversation with my wife before Christmas over dinner, and I put some thoughts out about where technology is leading to. Kind of finger in the air guesswork about some things that I thought would happen. And I said within 50 years, but probably less, certainly within our lifetimes, if we live that long, cars are already driving themselves to a certain extent. Every car, and maybe even in 20 years, every car on the road will drive itself, right? My father was in hospital for an operation recently, performed by surgeons. In 20 years, it'll be performed by robots, right? Generally, technology will just take over all these areas that it isn't fully embedded in yet. And that, on the one hand, that's kind of fascinating. I'm looking forward to seeing where that all goes, but it's also frightening, right? And where do our roles as security people fit into the world that is about to come? Because it's unavoidable, right? Technology is going to play that part in medicine, in travel, more than it has been. Planes will fly themselves fully. It's just the way society and technology is moving.
Yeah.
And it's not that far away, really. If you think how the internet has grown even over 20 years or so, and who knows where it would be in another 20.
Actually, wow.
And then cryptocurrency and things, which I was very naive about up until last year or so. But where's all that moving towards? What kind of weird society are we shifting into, and how are our careers going to shape up?
Yeah, because you've touched on something really interesting. Like, I mean, because you and I grew up in a time when there was no internet, and I still remember going on Yahoo and going ASL please, and even all that. Like, that sounds like, I mean, I age myself as I say that as well. But to your point, it's really interesting. If within our times we have moved from going online, remaining online 24/7, and going to office, being online there, coming back home, being online there, now staying at home and being online and using these virtual worlds to connect with people. Like, you and I can go on a very, very, very long conversation about what possible Megatron thing is going to come out. But I'm with you on that one. But as a to bring it back to the CISO conversation, then I think that we do have a social obligation. From a company perspective, the whole remote working definitely makes sense as well. Digital transformation expediting quite a bit. Are you finding like in terms of like your like the board challenges as well? Because you sort of mentioned that you've been trying to talk to board as well. Are there things that you're finding that at a leadership level there are conversations that at a broader scale, not just doesn't have to be TrustPilot, but at a broader scale you're finding that the awareness of cybersecurity is higher now? Like I think it's not just like how I remember seeing memes around board doesn't know what cybersecurity is, but I personally haven't felt that my board doesn't know cybersecurity. They totally know it, get it. Like I get messages before them about Log4j, like, hey, did you look at this? I'm like, yeah, looking at it. So do you find that same at your and in your circle as well?
I'm very lucky in that respect. There's a fantastic board at TrustPilot that's been put together with some very, very smart people. They're very, very interested in it as a topic and as a subject, and they've given me a lot of ability to build the teams that I need to build and have the budgets. It's right up there from a risk point of view, if not the major risk for businesses. So again, I can only really look at these things with my own experience. If boards aren't taking it seriously still, I know that's the old cliche, then I don't understand why, because, and the Log4j thing was a prime example. There is the biggest security vulnerability there's ever been, frankly. I mean, I struggle to think of something that's been more impactful than that.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, in our lifetime, most likely, yeah.
I just don't think anything has rivaled it yet. And I can't think there'll be too many organizations that haven't been impacted by it in some way, depending on the tech stack that they've got. So all of that will be filtering up to their boards. So we keep saying it, don't we? Every time there's hacks or every time there's a big vulnerability, is people need to take it more seriously. But my own experience is I work with a brilliant board who are very, very engaged in it, very interested in it, and I have quite a close relationship with them actually. So that's really good. That's really important to get their views on things. And what they're very good at as well is because they're generalists just across business. It's not just my world. They ask some really interesting questions that other people may not ask. So they don't have the technical knowledge particularly, but they want to know certain things at certain times. And
interesting.
I suppose what I've found from them is they just want to know there's a plan. They want to know that the thing is moving in the right direction and that it's getting the thought and the support that it needs.
Do you find that having a technical background coming from an engineering side, was that helpful getting into a role like this in I guess being a CISO in a cloud hosted company, I guess?
Yeah, for these kind of companies, I think, which are super fast paced, agile cloud businesses. I have talked at other events about the need for technical skill in security in general. It depends what your role is, right? If you're working in risk or compliance or something, then you probably don't need to know Python and how to automate things or whatever. So I think it depends on the role. I've worked with very, very technical senior people, and I've worked with very non-technical senior people, and it's a mix of skill sets, really. My shift into the CISO role from something more technical, it means that I'm back to doing a lot more of the day-to-day man management, the leadership, the coaching, the mentoring. There's lots of kind of, I wouldn't say politics, but you're trying to get involved in decision making in areas that you wouldn't have naturally been in. So you're less involved in that technical conversation and more in the strategic side of, well, where's that moving towards? What's coming down the line in 6 months, in 12 months? What do we need to solve that problem? What's going to break, in a year or as we grow? How do we scale it all with the business? It's all those kind of conversations, which I find fascinating, and I'm learning my way through how to do that. But I think having some technical skill is definitely worthwhile. I think you can then hold a conversation with different areas of the business beyond what you might have had previously. But again, it's a trade-off, right? I don't want to be sitting writing code all day anymore. It doesn't float my boat. And do I expect a CISO to be doing that? Not really, unless you're maybe at a small startup and you're the only person, or you've got to get your hands dirty sometimes. I expect CISOs to be strategically setting out the plan and the the mission and the roadmaps of where you're taking it to, rather than necessarily building things.
So do you reckon, I mean, I guess coming back to what we were talking about earlier, where people who may be looking at getting into a CISO role, like the whole strategic conversation around, like they may be already working on automating something in cloud security or AWS or whatever. Like, what are some of the examples that you can share? Like, they can think from hey, if I'm in my company right now, what are some of the example roadmaps they could be looking at for, hey, I guess as a test exercise for a future role in this?
So I'll give you what I've done here, right? And this has been with the help of other people that I've worked with. There's probably too many people to name check, but people like Kevin Fielder, when I was at Just Eat, been a big help for me because I got to see how he built those teams out and how he engaged with the board there, and learned a lot from people like that. I've been lucky to work around some really smart people. And then industry wise, there's obviously just some really cool names that do talks and help kind of strategize some of this stuff. What I tend to go back to, and it's not rocket science, is risk, right? If I was anybody trying to give advice to somebody going into a CISO role, your first 3 months in a CISO role, right? Just take it back to basics. What are the risks to the business from an InfoSec point of view? It doesn't have to be an exhaustive list of things, right? What are the 5-6 things that you really, really care about, right? Is it ransomware? Is it compliance? Is it kind of misconfiguration of cloud environments? What are those things that are going to cause really, really nasty things? Data breaches, major incidents, real pain points. And then what are you doing about them, right? What do you have in play just now? And that's from people, process, technology, the usual stuff. And if you don't have those things, well, where are you going to take it to, and what are your focus areas? The one battle I've had, I think, since moving into this kind of role is I have 100 things to do. And it's always a trade-off between what I don't do. And that's the harder decision. Why am I doing that piece of work over that piece of work? Why is that more important than that? And it all comes back to risk. What risk am I trying to reduce by doing that piece of work? Because if the other one is less important, albeit still important, that's my trade-off then. And I use things like NIST's framework for, the 5 pillars of NIST. And just anything that will kind of help add some of those frameworks in to help you. You don't have to make this stuff up on your own. The information is out there. There's some cool frameworks to use from a risk point of view. There's frameworks within cloud, which are valuable. I know we all talk about CIS and a few other things. There are starting places for you to investigate how to get these things off the ground if your company doesn't have them in play. But it's like any job in life, right? Sometimes you don't know until you're just in there and you're dealing with it and you're trying to move it from one place to another. You can watch all the talks in the world, but until you're in the environment dealing with the day-to-day, you're not quite sure how you're going to handle it. And sometimes you don't know what the answer is. You need to go and figure it out.
Yeah, I think it's such a good point as well. Like you can watch all the talks in the world, but when it comes to it, like actually executing it, you're like, oh wow, what's the right decision here?
Yeah, even moving company, things that you've tried previously, you'll find won't work. I mean, I've had experience of that with bug bounty and a few other things where I've tried to replicate pieces of work and they've failed massively because the environment's different, the culture's different, the level of maturity, you're just not quite ready, or there's clashes of personalities or budgets or whatever it might be. There's lots of different things that can impact some of these things. So even taking things that have worked previously into new environments sometimes just don't work, or they're not the right thing to do. And that's a massive learning curve as well. And in the last sort of 9-10 months, I've been really wary of that. I'm not just trying to copy what has happened somewhere else. So Just Eat was a great example of that. Really great team setup, really super talented people. I could replicate that entirely in this role, but would it be the right thing to do? Is it what the business needs? Is it what the risk sort of appetite demands?
That's interesting. So is the role, to your point about transitioning from a security leader role in one company versus the other, to your point about that basic framework, approaching it from a risk perspective, pick the top 5, go down that path or I guess anyone who's listening in can probably even go down the path of, if they know AWS or Azure or Google Cloud, whatever, take that as a path for, hey, how good are we with detecting security here? Like, are we like at a level that I can detect when something like, I don't know, scenario X happens with an unencrypted volume or whatever, and like that could be a benchmark. Like, I mean, you can set your own benchmark at that point, and that could be the risk level that you may be working with, right?
Well, for me, it was around kind of what are the start with the big things, right? Start with the real company impacting events that could happen. You know, there's only so many of them for the business you'll be working in. There's no point trying to fix 200 things at the same time and all this kind of real niche. People tend to like going down the niche route because it's interesting and it's new and it's exciting. But you might have a massive gap over here that you're missing, and it could be simple things around how you're configuring environments or where your data is and who's got access to it, and can you even see what's happening in some of these environments? That's what I'm building out. I've got an awesome person in building out SecOps here at the moment, and that's one of the major pieces of work at the moment is, well, can we even see what's going on in these environments? If I can't see it, I don't know it's happening. So therefore, I'm sort of pissing in the wind, if you excuse the swearing. So yeah, take it back to basics. I know we use that term all the time in security, don't we? But
yeah,
you don't have to overcomplicate it. If you can solve those 5-6 major things or get to a nice level of understanding of them and where you're at, the rest will flow from there. But if you run off in tangents trying to fix very niche things, I mean, sure, you'll move the needle a little bit in those areas, but you're going to be missing major things. And for most companies, I think it's data, right?
Yeah,
you need your applications to be running all the time, and you need data to be available and not exposed to the internet to a point that it can be weaponized. They're the company impacting things generally. Again, I'm kind of
I mean, if you're looking for new ones, you can always search cybersecurity breaches, and you get like 10 more scenarios: ransomware, data breaches, cloud misconfiguration. You can, I mean, to your point, it's only a handful. They're not that many.
Well, there's very little that comes out from a hack point of view where it's, unless it's kind of nation state stuff where you think, oh, that's really niche, that's really, it's the same stuff. Okay, there's been some movement over the years in cloud, and cloud's become a major attack vector, but we're still seeing ransomware, we're still seeing phishing. Phishing's been around decades now, and insider events, it's the same stuff. And I don't actually think that's going to change particularly in the next 5 to 10 years. You'll see more. Well, the surface is just getting bigger all the time. We use more applications, more things are connected to the internet. That's where everything's moving to. But the fundamental underlying risks that you'll be protecting against, I don't think are going to change massively again soon. I don't see what the next big disruptor is in technology now that we've gone to cloud. I'm not sure what that would be, frankly. I think we'll just automate more, and we'll consolidate in certain places, and we'll do things faster. That'll continue to be what we end up doing.
Because I think I mean, I've got some thoughts there, because I feel like cloud was an abstraction or based on automation on existing data centers. And the next layer after that, I see companies coming up where certain things, even the part of deploying IAC, infrastructure as code, and automating that, like they're making that into a platform. Like I know so many companies that have platform teams, just their job is just to manage the cloud platform and the toolkit for the platform. Like that's becoming a SaaS product as well. And to your point, where there may be a point where it doesn't matter if you're on AWS, Azure, or Google Cloud, IBM, Oracle Cloud, whatever. If the layer on top you care about is more of a what's the word, like a PaaS at this point in time. All you have is a platform. I want to put a data project in there, or I want to put something else in there, or I go SaaS. I can't imagine IaaS lasting for that long. Well, I mean, I don't know what your thought on that are.
Yeah, but it will still be in that cloud area, and I think that's where the major continued progression will be. I think.
Yeah. I mean, definitely there's no like next frontier, for lack of a better word. Like this, I mean, at least not visible so far. Even cloud native still has cloud in it, so it needs to run somewhere. Still needs to run some kind of a cloud platform, either in Google Cloud or AWS somewhere. So, or it's running on premise, then you're going back. You probably don't want to go back. So yeah, I don't.
This is where this is where the Log4j thing was particularly interesting and fraught. It's been an interesting month for all of us in the industry that we're using so many applications these days. There's so many SaaS things and so many kind of platforms that we can use and third-party dependencies. It's just huge now, and that particular vulnerability spanning so many potential components or things that you might use is, I honestly don't know what you can do about that. I mean, obviously, there's nothing you can do about 0 days anyway, because there's 0 days for a reason. But
that's right. Yeah.
How do you reduce? So supply chain risk is probably one of my major risks, from a company point of view.
Yeah.
But I continue to struggle to think what you can do about that. I mean, sure, you can interrogate their posture religiously if you want, but that's not going to stop something like the Log4j thing at this point in time. And I don't know what the answer is there to try and reduce those things.
Actually, yeah, because to your point, you may, like all of us in the industry may know that there's a Log4j, but the supply chain you're working with may not even have because they would be too small. They don't have a security team. You may reach out, hey, are you affected by Log4j? No, we're not. And then next day someone actually, oh, we are. Oh, like, oh, sorry, yeah, we are affected. And like, what you're telling me 2 days later, I've told everyone that we're not being affected. And like, I imagine scenarios like that coming out of this as well.
Well, and having a vulnerability that affected so many sort of major applications. I don't want to sort of pick on anybody here, but it was a reasonable number of major application providers. And some of those are the best in the world. And these are the best tech companies in the world, and they couldn't find it. They didn't know it existed. And I just think we're setting ourselves up. There'll be more of those. I think we should brace ourselves that the next few years. Hopefully not, right? Let's hope for the best. But we should brace ourselves for continued supply chain where it affects pretty much everything that you do, and that you'll have to down tools for weeks to deal with those things. I think that's how. The more connected we are, the more apps we're using, the more we spread data across different places, and the more that's going to become a problem. But they're interesting problems to solve, right? Because I
think so. Yeah. Well, I mean, I know we've actually touched on a lot of interesting topics. So, but I imagine there would be good enough food for thought for a lot of people listening in to go, actually, yeah, I haven't thought about that from my company perspective or personal perspective. Actually, because I'm just conscious of the time that we spent so far as well, because we're very close to the end as well. And I think I'm glad we kind of closing off at least the main questions around the path where this is kind of where the future is going for CISOs in a cloud world. And we don't know what the next frontier is, but at least whatever it may be, for the moment, cloud seems to be the popular one, and cloud native seems to be the popular one. So hopefully no more Log4j, no more level 10 issues for the next few years, where we still can go back and enjoy our work from home holidays. I mean, work from home.
Certainly not at Christmas. If they can avoid the biggest vulnerability of all time the week before Christmas, that would be...
I think that would be pretty amazing. If you can just drop that in the ether, take the whole year. Like, why just focus on just that particular time period? It's funny. But so this is kind of like the final question, and you have gone through the fun question before. So I think I'm going to change a few. So we'll see how you go with the fun 3 questions that I have towards the end. With the first one being, what do you spend most time on when you're not doing any work on technology or cloud? But I imagine your answer has changed from pre-COVID now. So what do you spend most time on now when you're not working on cloud or technology?
Yeah, do you mean outside of work? So my kids.
Yeah, outside of work, yes.
Two little kids who eat up all of your remaining energy. But they're great fun. Yeah, mainly that. I wish I had more time to do things like playing instruments and reading. I used to read a lot, and I don't get the chance to do that as much these days, just for the age of the kids. It's just a bit of a trade-off. Still go to music stuff. Well, now that things are back open, still go to gigs and festivals. Take the kids now to festivals. That's probably why.
Yeah, cool. And next question: what is something that you're proud of and is not on your social media in the last 2 years that you've not been here before? Because I mean, I've obviously heard the first one, but I want the last 2 years. What have you done something you're proud of, but is not on your social media?
What am I proud? I mean, frankly, just getting through it, right?
Yeah, I mean, that in itself is a big feat to come out like still positive and smiling. I think that's definitely a big feat.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose I changed job during this pandemic, and yeah, I've got a 2-year-old, so we had another child just before the start of it all. I think just bringing them up and trying to keep it as calm as possible, and yeah, trying to keep a smile on my face. I would say I'm kind of proud of, yeah, just
Wow.
getting through it, as I'm sure we've all tried to do.
Yeah, I think I definitely appreciate all the parents during the lockdown period as well, when a lot of people were just like, "Oh my God, there's no daycare, there's no childcare, none of that," and you have to just find ways to do your actual job and engage kids who are in the house, basically ripping the roof apart. But you kind of have to just like figure out a way to just balance the two. So kudos to all the parents who had to go through this exercise and probably still going through them. Because I hear there's still a few countries in the world which are still going through curfews and lockdowns and stuff as well. So everyone's going through that. Definitely a shout out to them as well.
Yeah,
Uh,
definitely.
Last but not least question, what's your favorite cuisine or restaurant that you can share? Or have you
Cuisine.
started cooking now more at home now?
Yeah, so definitely Indian, but also Mexican are my two sort of favorite cuisines. There's a place in the UK called Dishoom, which is a sort of
Oh,
Bombay
nice.
cafe.
Yeah,
There's a few in
really nice
London,
food. Yeah.
there's one in Edinburgh. They actually released the recipe for one of the
For the
curries
book,
they
yeah.
did. I learned to cook at the start of lockdown, and it's just amazing. The food's absolutely phenomenal. That's probably, yeah, it would probably be family, music, day job, food. Is probably my four passions
Yeah.
in life.
Well, that's probably great habits to have as well, especially, and having family number one is definitely the best one as well, man. Cool. That's what we had time for, man. I think, but I've enjoyed our conversation as always, and I
Yeah.
also love the fact that we touched on like what's the possible future for other people who may be looking into this from a CISO perspective. We've got Krista there saying thank you as well. Thank you, Ashish and Stu. Appreciate the time taken for this chat and sharing with us great insights. Thanks, Krista. Hopefully that was helpful as well. But I definitely found that I imagined a lot of people took food for thought for what else they could look out for in this new cloud world, in a COVID normal world, as they would say. Where can people reach out to you if they want to have for further conversation about these topics?
Yeah, get me on LinkedIn these days. I'm not doing Twitter as much as I used to, but I'm still available on there. Stu Hirst InfoSec. Yeah, LinkedIn if you want to connect. I do have to mention, by the way, we're recruiting, so I'm looking for an AppSec lead just now. London, Edinburgh, Copenhagen. There's going to be a cloud security role. In fact, 2 cloud security roles coming this year. So we're going to build that out a little bit as well. So keep an eye on that. Get me on LinkedIn if you want to chat about any of those. So sorry, that's the pitch.
I'll definitely be commenting on this to get some eyes on that on that role as well, man. So yeah, definitely would be a great person to work with for whoever is listening.
Awesome.
All right, cool. All right, thanks everyone. I will let you go with that one. I will see you back on our weekend episode where we'll continue the identity and access management month that we're having at the moment with Cloud Security Podcast. But otherwise, I will stay safe and I'll see you on the weekend. See ya.